Overthinking is killing you from the inside. You may have heard this phrase before, or maybe this is the first time it reaches you. But what does it really mean? How is it possible that something as common as thinking can have this kind of power over our lives? We all go through it, one thought after another, non-stop. We think about the future, about the past, about everything that could have been or might be. And with each thought, something seems to slip away. Hours pass, but what remains is the feeling of being in a whirlwind, unable to escape. But what if I told you that this overthinking might be the root of something much deeper, something that could be preventing you from living fully, from truly experiencing life, instead of just observing it? French philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." And maybe that's exactly what's happening to you. The excess of thoughts leaves no space for inner silence. And it's in that silence that peace, clarity, and true connection with oneself can bloom. In this video, we will explore how overthinking, often disguised as an attempt to control or understand everything, is actually imprisoning you. You are trapped in a cycle that leads nowhere, and worst of all, it's robbing you of the ability to live with purpose, to truly feel freedom, and often to deeply know yourself. Today, you'll learn how to free your mind from this weight. We will uncover what overthinking really means and why it's making you die inside. By the end, you'll have practical tools to interrupt this cycle, begin living with more ease, and regain control over your own mind. Get ready for a journey of self-discovery. Let's begin. What is overthinking? And why is it so common? Have you ever noticed that person who seems not to care about anything, yet everything around them seems to work out? Maybe it's someone at work, or even that friend who, despite facing difficult situations, remains calm and serene, without getting caught up in their own thoughts. How do they manage that? What do they know that you don't? Overthinking, or what many call rumination, is a mental habit that everyone, some way, develops. But what exactly is overthinking? Simply put, it's when our mind doesn't stop spinning, constantly returning to the same thoughts, problems, and worries, without coming to any solution. Sound familiar? This behavior is not just an annoyance. It's a defense mechanism born from fear. The fear of making mistakes, the fear of losing control, the fear of not being good enough. When the mind gets stuck in this cycle, what it's really trying to do is avoid pain, trying to find a way to control the future, to prevent suffering. But in reality, what it ends up doing is paralyzing us. This becomes a spiral. The more we think about something, the more anxious we become. And the more anxious we get, the more we think, and so on. The philosopher Seneca once said, "It is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." In other words, it's our repeated thoughts that trap us, not the situations themselves. But why does this happen? The answer lies in how our brain functions. The human brain is an organ designed to seek patterns and solutions. In ancient times, this was useful for our survival, helping us detect danger and make quick decisions. However, in the modern world, this survival mechanism through excessive thinking becomes an enemy. It's no longer helping us solve concrete problems, but instead generating endless worries. Have you ever noticed how your mind tends to go back to a problem even when you try to stop thinking about it? It's like a wheel spinning that doesn't stop, even when you want to rest. The problem is that, instead of seeking solutions, this wheel just feeds anxiety, and the cycle continues. The most important thing here is to understand that overthinking is not natural or necessary. In fact, it's a choice we make, even without realizing it, to try to control something we cannot control. And that's the key to begin freeing your mind. Recognizing that you don't need to solve everything with your thoughts, that often the solution lies in silence, in stillness, and not in the constant struggle of the mind. So, why are we so prone to this habit? What makes us believe that by thinking more, we will solve more? The answer lies in the fear of not being enough, of not having control over our lives. The real challenge here is learning to trust that not everything needs to be solved in our minds. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies in letting go. Are you ready to release your mind from this weight? How overthinking prevents connection with the present. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where you should be completely present, but your mind was elsewhere? Maybe you were having a conversation, but instead of truly listening, you were thinking about something that happened in the past or worrying about the future. This phenomenon is more common than it seems, and at the same time, it is one of the greatest thieves of our well-being. Imagine you're sitting at a cafe, watching the rain gently fall outside the window. Instead of truly experiencing the moment, the smell of the coffee, the sound of the rain, the comfort of the chair you're sitting in, your mind starts to wander. You remember an argument with a friend, and suddenly you begin to rethink every word exchanged. Or you start imagining what could happen at work tomorrow. What should have been a simple moment of pause turns into a mental race that takes you away from the here and now. What happens in that moment? Your mind is escaping the present. And when we are away from the present, we are, in a way, away from ourselves. The philosopher and mystic Eckhart Tolle, author of The Power of Now, says, "The past has no power over the present moment." However, the reality is that we spend so much time reliving the past or projecting the future that we rarely find ourselves in the only moment that truly exists, the present. This mental movement is not just a mistake, it is a reflection of how our minds have been shaped. We are conditioned to look to the future, to plan, to worry, while at the same time, we are driven to look to the past and analyze everything we did or didn't do. The problem? None of it can be changed. The past is a memory, and the future has not yet arrived. The only true reality is now. The mind, however, continues in its relentless search for control, wanting to predict what is to come or understand what has already passed. This constant movement leads us to a state of distraction. Energy and attention are divided between things we cannot control or change, while the present slips away from us. It's like trying to hold the wind. You can feel it, but you can't grasp it. And this is the heart of the problem: disconnection. Every time your mind gets stuck in the past or the future, you lose the chance to live fully in the present moment. That sense of peace you desire, that feeling of being whole, being at home, becomes more distant. Life passes by, and you don't even notice. As the Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "You cannot step into the same river twice. The present is fluid, unique, and never returns." So, the real question is, how much time will you spend distancing yourself from it? Excessive thinking, when it prevents us from being present, also prevents us from hearing our own being. The mind that chases the past or the future takes us away from our emotional experience, from our body, from our breath. And this is where we enter dangerous territory. Without this connection to the now, we become more vulnerable to stress, anxiety, and even a sense of losing control. Have you noticed how, when you truly immerse yourself in a moment, whether listening to music, reading a book, or simply observing nature, time seems to slow down? This happens because, in that moment, you are aligned with the present. And when you are in the present, you connect with your essence. The moment is the only space where you truly exist, where your mind and body are in harmony. Now, take a moment. Feel your breath. Are you here, or is your mind elsewhere? This is the first step to begin freeing yourself from overthinking. By being present, you interrupt the mental cycle and allow the current moment to reveal itself clearly. The now is the only space where you can truly live. So, how can we bring our mind back to the present, especially when it tends to get lost so much in the past and future? Let's explore that in the next chapters. The psychology behind overthinking. Have you ever felt that the more you think about something, the harder it becomes to find a solution? Sometimes, the mind seems to enter a cycle, a loop of repetitive thoughts, as if it's stuck in a maze. This pattern is known as rumination. While it's an attempt to find answers, it often keeps the mind trapped, far from any real clarity. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychoanalyst, described a concept that can help us understand why our minds enter cycles of overthinking: the shadow work. For Jung, the shadow is that part of ourselves that we don't recognize or that we often try to suppress. These are the aspects of our psyche that we ignore or reject, either due to fear, shame, or because we're not ready to face them. However, these aspects don't disappear. They remain in the unconscious, influencing our behaviors, thoughts, and emotions, often without us being fully aware of it. When we're trapped in overthinking, we are often, in some way, trying to deal with these shadow aspects. Overthinking, in this context, is not just a search for answers, but a way of attempting to control or understand these unknown parts of ourselves. The mind clings to these issues, repeating the same thoughts and reflecting on the same problems, as if it's trying to find a solution to something that's deeply rooted in our unconscious. Rumination works as an attempt to resolve these internal conflicts, but in reality, it only keeps the problem buried deep in the mind, often in a distorted way. The more we think about something, the deeper it becomes. What was once a small problem turns into a mountain of thoughts, an emotional overload. Instead of facing the root of the issue directly, we end up getting lost in repetition, unable to make any real progress. Jung believed that the key to overcoming the shadow wasn't to run from it, but to integrate it. He said, "What you resist, persists." In other words, if we try to ignore or suppress these parts of our psyche, they become even more powerful. When we're stuck in a cycle of rumination, we might be avoiding confronting something that needs to be looked at directly. Instead of solving the problem, we're just postponing the moment of facing it, creating more internal tension. Now, imagine that instead of ruminating, you decided to approach that thought differently, with the intention to understand it, without rushing to find an answer. By doing this, you stop fighting against it and, instead, allow it to reveal itself to you. This is the process of integrating the shadow, not rejecting what emerges but accepting it, understanding it, and thereby releasing the energy it had been holding onto. It's important to understand that overthinking is not just about anxiety or worry. It's a reflection of something deeper within us. We're trying to understand or control something that's beyond our conscious reach. But the more we try to control or eliminate these thoughts, the more they continue to dominate our mind. This vicious cycle is what keeps the shadow alive and active, instead of allowing us to integrate its lessons. The impact on the unconscious is profound. By staying in a state of rumination, we fail to properly process our feelings and emotions. They remain stored, repressed, until they find a way to manifest in our lives in a disorganized manner. Often, these feelings express themselves in unexpected ways, such as outbursts of anger, deep sadness, or even physical symptoms like body aches. When the shadow is not integrated, it continues to affect our psyche, sabotaging our mental and emotional health. When we find ourselves trapped in overthinking, we are, in reality, disconnected from our true self. We're more focused on trying to control or understand the shadows than on experiencing the present moment and our true emotions. This process can be compared to an internal battle, where the mind is trying to understand something that, in truth, cannot be controlled by mere reasoning. True understanding comes from acceptance, from surrender, from integrating the hidden parts of our psyche. The first step in breaking the cycle of overthinking is recognizing rumination as a reflection of our attempt to resolve unresolved issues. Once we begin to understand that our excessive thoughts are just the surface of a deeper conflict, we can start to release control and allow the solution to unfold naturally, without forcing the mind to find answers. True peace comes from acceptance, from integrating the shadow, and from returning to the present moment. So, the next time you notice yourself trapped in a cycle of repetitive thoughts, ask yourself, what am I trying to understand or control that, in reality, cannot be controlled? By asking this question, you begin to create space for healing and inner resolution. And in doing so, you begin to release the energy that these thoughts have over you. Strategies to free the mind and find peace. Now that we understand the nature of excessive thinking and its impact on our well-being, it's time to discuss practical ways to interrupt this cycle and begin finding inner peace. There is no magic solution or quick fix, but there are proven techniques that can help break the cycle of rumination and bring the mind back to the present moment. One of the most effective tools for interrupting the cycle of excessive thinking is the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness involves the ability to focus entirely on the present moment, without judgment or distractions. Imagine being in a park, and instead of letting your mind wander to future concerns or past regrets, you fully immerse yourself in the sensations of the moment. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the aroma of fresh air, the feeling of the sun on your skin. This kind of mindfulness helps slow down the mind and interrupts the constant flow of thoughts. But how can we apply mindfulness in our daily lives when excessive thinking seems to take over? One simple yet powerful practice is paying attention to your breath. Breathing deeply and consciously is one of the quickest ways to bring the mind back to the present. When you feel your thoughts turning into a whirlwind, stopping and breathing intentionally can interrupt the cycle. Take a deep breath, hold for a few seconds, and exhale slowly. Each breath becomes an anchor, a pause in the fast pace of the mind. With practice, you'll start to notice that by focusing on your breath, your thoughts calm down and your mind clears. Meditation is another deeply transformative practice. Many people associate meditation with the goal of silencing the mind. But in reality, it's not about eliminating thoughts. Instead, meditation is about learning to observe thoughts without identifying with them. When you sit in silence and allow your thoughts to come and go without attaching to any of them, you begin to realize that it's not the thoughts that control you, but you who control them. Imagine your thoughts are like clouds in the sky. They can be dense and dark or light and scattered, but all of them pass. You, however, remain like the sky and changing and constant. Over time, this practice of observing thoughts without engagement can be a powerful tool for breaking the cycle of rumination. Meditation also helps distance us from the narratives we create around our thoughts. Many of our cycles of excessive thinking are fueled by stories we tell ourselves, stories of fear, guilt, or concerns about the future. Meditation, by helping us observe these thoughts, allows us to see them for what they are, just thoughts. They are not our reality, nor our absolute truth. And with this realization, we begin to loosen the control we try to maintain over them. But how do we make these practices an integral part of our lives, especially when the mind continues to act like a whirlwind of thoughts? One simple technique to integrate mindfulness into your daily life is practicing here and now during daily activities. During a meal, for example, focus entirely on the taste of the food, the texture, the smell. While walking, notice the movement of your body, the sensation of your feet touching the ground. These small practices of mindfulness, even in the simplest tasks, help slow down the mind and increase our connection to the present moment. Besides mindfulness and meditation, conscious breathing is a powerful technique to bring the mind back to the present. Breath is a direct bridge between the body and the mind, and when we use breathing consciously, we can disengage the mind from its constant rumination. Try this. Place one hand on your heart and the other on your abdomen. Take a deep breath, feeling the abdomen expand. Then exhale, letting go of any tension. By doing this, you are signaling to your body and mind that it's time to slow down. This technique not only helps interrupt excessive thinking, but also activates the body's relaxation response, bringing a state of calm and clarity. Another powerful technique is the practice of gratitude. Often, our excessive thoughts revolve around fears, failures, or worries. Gratitude helps shift our attention to the positive things we already have in our lives. By practicing gratitude daily, whether through a gratitude journal or simply reflecting on the things we are grateful for, we begin to reprogram the mind to focus on what is good. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges or difficulties, but rather paying attention to what is right and what has already been achieved. However, as with any practice, consistency is key. If you are just starting to explore these techniques, it's important to be patient with yourself. The mind, especially if it's used to rumination, won't quiet down overnight. But by gradually incorporating these practices, you begin to build a new mental pattern. A pattern where, instead of getting lost in excessive thoughts, you find yourself more connected to the present and at peace with yourself. Remember, freeing the mind is not about stopping thoughts. It's about learning not to be dominated by your thoughts. By practicing mindfulness, meditation, conscious breathing, and gratitude, you are creating space between you and your thoughts, allowing them to come and go without holding absolute control over your life. These moments of pause and clarity are what, over time, bring true inner peace. Each technique mentioned here is a tool to break the cycle of excessive thinking. By using them, you are moving closer to your true essence, to your inner self, and to the present moment, where peace and calm truly reside. As we come to the end of this journey through the maze of excessive thinking, remember that the power to free your mind is already within you. It's not about silencing your thoughts, but about creating space to observe them without getting lost in them. By practicing mindfulness, meditation, conscious breathing, and gratitude, you take the first steps toward reclaiming control over your mind and your life. This is not a race, it's a journey, and every small step counts. So, the next time you feel your mind running wild, pause. Take a deep breath, focus on the present moment, and let your thoughts pass by like clouds in the sky. With time, you realize that you are not your thoughts, you are the space in which they arise. Thank you for watching, and remember, peace begins when you stop fighting your mind.